What happens when a black teenager is kicked out of his own graduation? He stays silent for a year, then steps onto a TED stage and forces everyone who once dismissed him to listen. What happened next left the entire room speechless. Some evenings leave a taste in your mouth like rust. Not blood, not bitterness, just that cold iron sting that reminds you life has a special way of turning your hope into humiliation. Kevin Taylor knew that taste all too well. He stood there 17 and sharp, in a charcoal suit ironed within an inch of its life. His mama had worked the night shift and still found time to press every crease just right. In his hands, a bouquet of discount roses from Miss Lorraine's corner shop. Hand-picked, not because they were expensive, they weren't, but because he wanted to look like a young gentleman, a somebody, not just that Kevin from the South Side. He didn't smoke, didn't fight, didn't skip. The boy had a GPA that could make calculators jealous and spent his afternoons volunteering at the local library. Not because it looked good on a resume, but because it helped him forget that dinner at home was usually instant noodles and his mother's tired humming through a cracked bedroom door. He had no car, took the bus, walked the rest of the way. So he got to the gym early. Too early, maybe. The banners read, Class of 2024, in silver letters. Parents took selfies with their kids. Teachers laughed with honor students. The air buzzed with celebration. Kevin stood at the door, heart pounding. Not with fear. No, this was that strange kind of anxious hope. The kind you feel when you know something could go wrong. But maybe, just maybe, this time it won't. He took a breath, smiled, stepped forward, and then it happened. Mrs. Grace, the assistant principal, raised a hand like she was directing traffic, and Kevin was the accident waiting to happen. "Kevin, stop right there. What are you doing?" He blinked. "I'm here for graduation. Like everyone else, I'm graduating." He tapped the badge on his chest. Kevin Taylor, honors student. Simple, truthful. Grace squinted like he'd just flashed her a fake ID. "You're not on the list," she said flatly, arms folding with all the grace of a courtroom door slamming shut. "I'm sorry," Kevin let out a confused laugh. "I passed every exam, never missed a day, won awards. Isn't that what this is for?" "This is an invite-only event, and you're not on the list," she repeated, each word colder than the last. Students filed past. One whispered to another, recognizing him. Some averted their eyes. Teachers he admired? Silent. Nobody said, "Wait, that's Kevin. Let him in." Nobody asked, "Is there a mistake?" Nobody said anything. He didn't argue, just turned slowly, bouquet in hand, as if someone had pressed pause on the movie of his life. The roses no longer looked like a kind gesture. They looked foolish, like hope itself had played a cruel joke. Outside, near a rusted brown Honda Civic, his mother stood in her work uniform, exhaustion written deep in her face. A black woman who'd held up 2 jobs and a teenage son for nearly 2 decades. She saw him and came close, instinctively wrapping him in a hug. "What happened?" Kevin didn't want to crush her with the truth, but he wasn't good at lying. "Mix up," he muttered. "Let's go home." They walked in silence to the bus stop. She didn't press. He held the flowers like maybe, somehow, there was still someone out there who deserved them. That night, Kevin didn't speak, just sat at their kitchen table, opened the old busted laptop, and started typing. He wasn't writing to complain. He was writing to survive, to keep himself from exploding, from turning his heartbreak into something ugly, so he turned it into words. The first line was simple. "Today I learned you can be perfect and still not be enough." He wrote for 3 hours straight. Every paragraph hit like a punch. At the system, at the school, at the way some teachers looked right through him for years. He wasn't Kevin Taylor, the student. He was the black kid from the poor side of town. He posted it on Medium, not for clout, not for sympathy, just to let the hurt out. The title? When Excellence Gets You Nowhere. He hit publish, closed the laptop, went to bed thinking nobody would read it. The next morning, his phone rang like someone had just drafted him into the NBA. Friends forwarded links, Cousins he hadn't heard from in years messaged, "You said what we all feel." But there were other messages too. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. You know how schools are. Don't overreact. You didn't really expect them to remember every student, did you? Of course. Rule number one, never disturb white comfort, even with your presence. 1 week later, Kevin sat across from a local news anchor. The set was bright. The host wore an earnest expression and a tight smile. And Kevin, he sat with the calm of someone who'd already been broken and put himself back together. "I'm not asking for medals," he said. "I'm not trying to be a headline. I just want to be seen as a person, a son, a kid with dreams, and the right to feel joy at his own graduation." He didn't cry, didn't raise his voice, but his tone, steady, strong. Every syllable landed like a truth bomb. The kind of calm that rattles people more than shouting ever could. Back at home, Kevin reread the comments. Some called him brave. Others said he was overreacting. But the most haunting line came from a stranger. "This story hurts, because it's mine too." Kevin sat in silence, hands shaking. And then the email started. From students in other states, from teachers who finally got it, from journalists, activists, and even university deans. Each one said the same thing. "Your story matters. Please keep telling it." He didn't know what would happen next, but one thing was clear. The boy who wasn't on the list had just made his own. And now, the world was watching. What happened next changed everything. You don't want to miss how this story unfolds. A year had passed, not quietly, not gently, but like a storm trapped inside a glass globe. Everything shook, rattled, and the pressure built until you wondered whether the walls would crack, but you were nowhere to escape. Kevin Taylor was no longer just that kid who didn't get invited to his own graduation. He had become something more. No, not a hero just yet, but a symbol. He was still washing library floors and frying potatoes at a gas station diner, but everywhere he went, people whispered, "That's the guy." And believe him when he says that was as infuriating as wearing a crown you never wanted. He never chased fame. What he wanted was equality, but what he got instead were iPhones shoved in his face like he was part of a museum exhibit, and principals nodding politely as if they'd done him some twisted favor. The kind of nod that says, "We see you, but if you look closer, see nothing at all." One evening after clocking out from the diner, no, not to go smoke because he had never once held a cigarette, not even to escape or relax, but just to breathe, to find some air because greed cooked into grease and fryer heat offers barely enough room to inhale. He stepped outside behind a dumpster and closed his eyes, hoping the cool air would taste more like something alive than the stench of his shift. He closed his eyes and tried not to think about how his life felt like a burned-down paycheck, slowly going up in flames and leaving ash where dreams once sat. And then he heard a voice. "Hey!" He looked up. An older gentleman stood there in a tweed jacket that looked like it came from another era, threads hinting at Ivy League somewhere, and his beard curled like Santana's guitar riffs, with eyes that held Harvard's reflection. "Are you Kevin Taylor?" he asked. Kevin nodded cautiously. In a world where even honesty can be twisted into accusation, nodding often seemed wiser than speaking. "I read your article. You're a poet, hell of one. But they taught you to stay quiet, didn't they?" Kevin shrugged, because that was a question the world already knew. One he lived with every single day. The man surveyed him with a kindness that startled him. "At Columbia, we have a space for voices like yours, those who refuse to be silenced. Do you want to be truly heard?" Weeks later, Kevin stood in an auditorium at Columbia University, facing hundreds of students and faculty members whose eyes were fixed on him like their future depended on his words. He spoke without a hitch or hesitation, without the jitter of someone holding back. He spoke as though every word was a brick, something he was using to build a house big enough for all the Jim Crow ghosts tucked inside his bones and every locked door he'd encountered. He began, "They taught me to be good, to be polite, to shrink into the background. But what they never told me was that for some folks, the phrase good black boy is an oxymoron, something they don't even believe can exist. I was too quiet to be dangerous and too smart to be convenient. His words struck like lightning. The auditorium erupted in applause. Students rose to their feet. Professors joined in. Somewhere someone recorded it. Then it went viral, spreading through smartphones like wildfire ignited on Tinder. 7 nights later, he found himself in front of the cameras again. Local station WBN, soft set lights painting him like someone important. Opposite an anchor named Joanna Felton, whose ratings soared higher than April showers. Kevin, you've stunned the nation with your voice. They're calling it a new wave. How do you feel? He flashed a weary but genuine smile. I'm surprised and exhausted. Exhausted? She asked, leaning forward. Yes, Joanna, he said, calm as deep water. Because listening to us is trendy, but really hearing us, now that's a revolution. Some viewers cheered, others cringed, and somewhere in the static, someone ground their teeth. Because there were always people whose comfort hinged on keeping black voices small. Then came the statement from the school district. The graduation incident was due to an administrative error. We regret the misunderstanding. Misunderstanding, as if they'd accidentally dropped him in a recycling bin and only regretted how loud his scream was when someone discovered he wasn't trash. A week later, there was a televised debate, Kevin facing Mr. Browning, the same teacher who had once given him an A+, now stepping forward to help polish the school's tarnished image. Kevin is a good kid, Browning began, as if his words were a charm, but sometimes youth don't understand how protocol works. Protocol? Kevin repeated, his voice low, deliberate. Is that your code word for racism? The auditorium sucked the air in. Cameras shuddered. Silence went loud. Look, Browning tried again. No one meant any harm. It was just? Kevin leaned in so the cameras caught every grain of meaning he wielded behind that one syllable. Just I was the only black student forgotten on the guest list? Just everyone closed their eyes? Just my mother stood there, watching her son get pushed out the door while nobody looked up to stop it? Silence, then deep, soul-level stillness. I'm not here for your apologies, he said, voice quiet but seismic. I'm here so you, and everyone watching, never forget who we are. We are not exceptions, not statistics. We are faces, voices, our futures. The crowd rose, the halls rang, and something shifted. 48 hours later, Kevin got an email stamped in red. TEDx Harlem. The message read, We invite you to speak at TEDx Harlem. Your voice deserves to be heard. He stared at the screen long enough that his phone buzzed hot. Then he replied, yes. And just like that, the journey shifted. I mean, not just in geography, but in momentum, in meaning, in every fiber of what he was becoming. The next day, he walked into a convenience store clutching a cup of oatmeal and a packaged sandwich. The cashier looked up from the register and said, You're that guy? From TED? Almost, he replied, giving a half smile. Right now, I'm just the guy with the oatmeal. Later that evening, work text blinked on his screen. He should be education secretary. Funny line until you remember. Yesterday, he was still scrubbing toilets in the back room. Between that moment and the stage lights, there were dark nights. Anonymous letters accusing him of playing the racism card. Messages like, stop using your race for attention. Know your role. You'd have been on that stage if you hadn't been so loud. But Kevin didn't fire back. He didn't rant. He prepared. Night after night, he sat in his small apartment, writing each thought, each phrase on paper, like a soldier sharpening ammunition for the moment that mattered. Because he knew this speech couldn't be a nod or a whisper. It had to be a blast. He practiced in front of the mirror like he was declaring a creed to the next generation. If you're born on the wrong side of the city, your voice is already labeled too loud, even if you're just asking why the hell no one wants you to speak. If you adjust yourself, you're invisible. If you don't, you're a threat. I chose to be a threat with a voice. And then, 2 days before Ted, his phone rang. Kevin, it's Dr. Miller. We've just learned that dozens of teachers from your old school have registered to attend your talk, including Mrs. Grace. He paused, breathing hard. Then he said, Fine, let them come. I'm done whispering. This is the climax. Everything you've been waiting for is right here. Stay tuned to see how the hero sets them all straight. The theater wasn't glamorous. It wasn't new. It creaked when people shifted in their seats, and the curtains held the scent of too many monologues and forgotten names. But tonight, those velvet red chairs, faded from decades of stories, were packed wall to wall. And though the chandeliers hadn't glowed like they used to in years, the air inside pulsed like something was about to break, like history was whispering from the floorboards. It was Harlem. And in Harlem, titles mean nothing. Here, a grandmother in orthopedic shoes sat beside a tech entrepreneur in a $1,000 coat. Here, everyone's equal, until someone opens their mouth and reminds the room who really speaks for the streets. Kevin Taylor was behind the curtain, alone. No stylist, no prep team, no publicist brushing lint off his jacket. Just him, a crumpled paper in one hand, and the kind of adrenaline that doesn't shake your legs. It hums in your bones like the body already knows. This moment is more than just a speech. He peeked through the side. The crowd was a quilt of faces, some eager, some skeptical. But his eyes found two in particular, and those two hit like a punch to the gut. First row, far left. Mr. Browning sitting too upright in a suit too expensive for the truth he used to dodge. His expression was neutral, but his eyes were busy rehearsing defenses. And just beside him, on the right side of the aisle, sat Mrs. Grace. Same perfect posture, same pressed blouse, same gaze like a blade, scanning the stage not for beauty, not for art, but for danger. And tonight, Kevin was that danger. 5 minutes, whispered the stage tech behind him. Kevin took a deep breath and stepped into the light. The applause that met him was polite, measured, as if the audience didn't yet know whether to cheer or wait to be told what they were clapping for. Kevin didn't smile, didn't wave. He planted his feet, looked straight ahead, and then, without a microphone, without a podium, he started. A year ago, he said, his voice clear and unwavering, I stood in front of my high school gym, in a suit, holding flowers, smiling, thinking I was somebody. He let it hang, let it hurt. And they told me I wasn't on the list, told me I wasn't invited to my own graduation, not because I failed, not because I caused trouble, but because I forgot something, something this country never lets you forget, that excellence doesn't make you belong, that even when you're the best, you're still black. You could hear the silence settle, not the kind that's empty, but the kind that waits to be cracked open. I won't waste time listing accomplishments. We, black folks, have had to perform for centuries just to earn the right to exist. I didn't come here to juggle degrees or parade my GPA. I came here because this story isn't just mine. His eyes landed on Mrs. Grace. She shifted slightly, leaned back as if bracing herself for what was next. I was polite. I was humble. I was invisible until I dared to speak. And that's the thing. The system doesn't fear noise. It fears articulation. It fears clarity. It fears voices that leave no space for denial. The applause came louder this time. From the center, from the back, from people who had lived this moment too many times. For months, I tried to figure it out. How a straight-A student with a perfect record becomes a disruption by simply showing up. And then I realized I was never a disruption. I was a reminder of the gap, a reminder of the bias, a reminder that this nation still hasn't figured out how to see us without suspicion. He spoke for 20 minutes. No script, just truth, just memory shaped into fire. He spoke of his mother, how she scrubbed countertops after midnight and still showed up to clap for a son they refused to let cross the stage. He spoke of the boy from his block who once asked, "What's the point of being top of the class if they still won't open the door for you?" And I told him, Kevin said, voice steady. It's worth it, but only if you're ready to knock that door down when they pretend not to hear you. The cheers that followed didn't ask permission. They erupted. He paused, turned to where Mrs. Grace sat. When she looked at me outside that gym, she didn't look angry. She looked indifferent. And that's worse, because indifference is the foundation of polite injustice. She didn't blink, but her knuckles had whitened on the armrest. I don't want your guilt, Kevin said. Guilt's cheap. It costs nothing. I want your honesty. I want you to say it. You didn't see me, not because I didn't shine, but because you refused to see the light. He looked into the crowd, then into the cameras. I used to be quiet, but now that I've found my voice, I'm not going back to silence. When he finished, the standing ovation wasn't about respect. It was about recognition. People cried. Others nodded with clenched fists. Some simply looked at him the way people look when they finally hear their own truth spoken out loud. Mr. Browning didn't move, left without a word. But Mrs. Grace, she approached, each step deliberate, as if every inch forward required a sacrifice of pride. Kevin, she said softly, your speech, it was powerful. He didn't respond. I'm not here to defend what happened. She hesitated. I think you deserve better. He met her gaze unshaken. I always did. The question was, were you ever ready to admit that? She nodded and walked away. A month later, Kevin stood in front of the district's teacher council, same room where his name had once been crossed off a list. This time, it was on a banner. He read it himself into the mic as the audience rose to their feet. Then came invitations to Washington, to NAACP panels, to university halls, even Harvard. But every time he spoke, he began the same way. I once wasn't allowed at my own graduation. That's where this story begins. And when asked how he lives now, how he breathes after the fire, he replies, I live quietly, but loud enough to be heard. The story is done, but the echo, it lingers in every hallway where someone still believes skin color decides worth. In every classroom where names like Kevin are still too easy to erase. And in every voice that finally decides, not today,